Sure. Thank you, Zoe. And you're way too kind. Have a great team that represents the council, and I'm just one member of that team. And I think I drew the short stick today because two of our team members are in Hawaii, which I'm not sure how that happened. They got to go to Hawaii, and I'm in Brownsburg, Indiana this morning. And I have another team member at KWK, but when we started our representation just a little over a year ago with the council, Lou Belch, who's a longtime lobbyist in the State House, and I decided to do this together, and quite honestly bid the process, bid it out with before Zoe was even there. She kind of adopted us because we were hired before she was hired. So it was an arranged marriage, I know, as she likes to talk about at times. But so Lou Belch and Sydney Moulton are from the Corridon group, and then myself and Grant Waggoner are from KWK Management Group. And so the two groups represent the council together, and it really gives us a depth and breadth of expertise, because Lou's been in the legislature for over 30 years, working with the legislature inside state government as well as outside as a contract lobbyist for over 30 years. And then myself, as Zoe said, it's going to be 40 years this January, will be my 40th legislative session. And then Sydney and Grant are the two younger members of our team that we're trying to mentor and raise up. And so a great group, and we really enjoy working in this space. We've worked in the space, Lou and Sydney, more on the FQ side at times, and Grant and I have done a lot of behavioral health. So looking forward to this next legislative session. But what I want to talk about first is the elections. And I know, seems like November, 9th was a long time ago, or 8th was a long time ago, but we're moving still with a recount in Indiana, so we don't have all the results done. But talk a little bit about how we got to that November election, things that transpired before that, then the election, and then really talk a little bit about the legislative process and what we look forward to as we get ready for this next legislative session. I want this to be truly interactive. So if you do have a question, I saw Amy's already said, go Brownsburg Bulldogs, because she also is a Brownsburg Bulldog. So she is in Hendricks County this morning as well. But feel free to raise your hand, and I probably can't see everyone on the screen, but I know Leanne and Zoe will help me with that. Ask a question. There are a lot of what we call alphabet soup, I know, in healthcare, and we talk a lot in acronyms. And if I say something legislatively that you didn't catch or understand, or had a little more, would like a little more feedback on that, please don't hesitate to ask that question. It truly is interactive here. I always like to start these kind of presentations with, this is not a political presentation. We are a two-party system in Indiana. We do have what people run as a libertarian candidate, but primarily recognize that we have Republicans and Democrats. Republicans, quite honestly, control the state. They have all statewide offices in the State House, and they have supermajorities in both the House and Senate. So when we talk about the majority, we're talking about Republicans. When we talk about the minority, we're talking about Democrats. And so I'm not a fan of supermajorities. I think there needs to be a checks and balances in our system, but the electorate's the one that decides that makes those decisions. And so that is what they've chosen as we move forward for the next 2 years, at least in the State House. So with that, I want to begin the process of what happened before the election. What happened before the election in the previous legislative session, we did redistricting, and we redistrict the states every 10 years after the census. And so what they do is the process, you get the census data from the federal government, and then they see where people have moved and relocated, and then they redraw the lines. And so that's what Indiana did in the 2021 legislative session, was redistrict. And when they redistrict, they sometimes, by the the process of that, you sometimes put two incumbents together. So we had some of that happen. Had incumbents that if they decided to run in their new districts had to run against each other. There were a couple of those. One of those decided not to run, they would retire. So redistricting played a huge role in this last legislative session. Obviously, the majority party, the Republicans, decided what the districts were. I have to say that I think they were pretty fair in their redistricting, because they lost as in when they redrew them, lost a favorable leaning Republican district to a more Democrat district. The Senate picked up a district that way. The House picked up a district that way for the Democrats. And so I do feel like that party leaders on both sides were trying to be much more fair. Previously, you may hear a term gerrymandering, where they make these, districts that look like, a snake. So you can pick up all the Republicans in one area or all the Democrats in another area. And the Supreme Court of the United States has said you can't do that anymore. So they truly, if you look at them, they're pockets of common areas. And so they're square, they're more square, they're more, from a geographic standpoint, take almost all of a county or half of a county. And so they've been much better at redistricting, what I would say are my opinion. So we have new districts. Everyone's running in a new district in 2022. We want to remember that, and we'll get a little bit more when we talk about the legislative process that we're going to go into. The House has 100 members. All 100 of those members ran in 2022. The Senate has 50 members, and half of those Senate members. So the House runs every 2 years, terms 2 years, all of them run. Senate is a 4-year term, and only half of those members run every 2 years. So we had 100 in the House run, 25 in the Senate run. And so the interesting part of those 125 that ran, there was redistricting, and then there was a lot of retirements. And so when the primary came around in April, you had all those people that had, May, you had all those people that had to file. So we had several people retire, probably more retirements in 2022 than I've seen probably in my time with working with the legislature. I think people were, it's a part-time job, but it's not a part-time job. I mean, you're on 24/7, 365 days a year, because you are an elected official. You're in the spotlight with every move that you make. And so I think we're finding it's harder and harder to find good people to run for public office. And so we had a lot of retirements, we had redistricting. And so when we come down to the primaries in May, I have a few statistics I was going to share with you. It's interesting that of the 25 seats that were up, 8 of the 25, okay, 8 of the 25 were uncontested. So it was, 8 people didn't have a primary opponent. Then in the general election, and in the House, of the 100, 42 of the 100 were uncontested. So 42 people knew, be it a Republican or a Democrat, if they didn't have an opponent in the general in November, had already won. So of the 125 seats that were up, only 40% were uncontested. So it is when you look at those districts, they'll say, well, does it lean Republican or does it lean Democrat? If it's 60-40, if it's 60, the party that you're asking about, Republican versus Democrat 40, you say, okay, do I really want to put my family through this and run when I only have roughly 40% of chance of winning? So if it's that kind of thing, in statistical analysis of it, then you're going to find it very difficult to find good candidates to run against each other. So we had some good primary and some good general elections, but for the most part, those candidates that you thought would win probably won. The only real upset that I would say was Terry Austin and Anderson. and many of you may know Terry. She is a Democrat, and Anderson have been there for about 10 years, 12 years, and was a huge supporter of behavioral health. And so we are going to miss Terry Austin in the State House next year. She was in leadership for the Democrat Party in the House, and so very, very supportive of our issues. And then in the Senate, there was one defeat, Michael Griffin up in Lake County. Senator Griffin there was a senator that had retired early because of his health, and so he was appointed by a caucus. And so this was the first time he was running, but a Republican beat Senator Griffin in Lake County. So the Senate ended up being 40 Republicans to 10 Democrats. And so it's a supermajority that the Senate will have going into this two-year term, which will be 2023 and 2024. And then the House, the Republicans have a 70 to 40 or 70 to 30 majority. So again, Terry Austin was the only loss in the House, and Michael Griffin was the only real loss in the Senate. Now, those bodies did have some new members. I think, as I said, we'll have about 20 new members between the House and Senate, which is again, it probably is close to the most of any time in the last recent history of the election. And so we have a lot from our perspective, we have a lot of education to do with those new members on our issues. And so we'll work towards that. And it's really important that you at the local level help us as you start to get to know those candidates. So that's the House and Senate. I think many of you probably, as all of us do by the end of the elections, get tired of those commercials. And so we had a very contentious Secretary of State race between Diego Morales and Destiny Wells. Democrats thought for the first time in probably a decade since they had won a statewide office that Destiny Wells was a good candidate. She was a very strong candidate, very capable person. Unfortunately, that one didn't go the way that the Democrats had hoped. And so Diego was elected pretty overwhelmingly from a statewide perspective. And then the other statewide that was highly contested was the United States Senate race in Todd Young. And Tom McDermott was his opponent. And both the Secretary of State and the U.S. Senate race were double-digit wins by the Republicans. And so Indiana has become not only a red state, but it's now being called at the federal level, would be called a deep red state. And it's really interesting because of growing up in Indiana and always being in Indiana and being a person that loves politics and loves the study of elections and kind of statistics and data as we follow it. You could almost say the Democrats would win most elections, and that's where our Democrats would come from, south of 40 in those more southern Indiana states. You can't say that anymore. You know, the Ohio River would what we would consider to be kind of blue counties. Those are deep red counties now. And again, why is that? Well, I think more people are moving to this, out from the cities and getting more rural, and people are moving from our borders into our state that are more Republican. And so you can't say that anymore, that Indiana has pockets of blue. It truly is a deep red state. And I think nationally, the talking heads would tell you that there's really there's some deep red states, deep blue states, and then there are a couple purple in between. And that's what the two sides are fighting for. And when you watch the national election results, that's exactly what it comes down to. And so Indiana continues to be, a supermajority Republican state. What does that mean for session? Do we have any questions on the election before we kind of how that dovetails into our next step when we talk about the legislative process and how the elections have impacted that? Anybody? Zoe, you have anything?
No, I think that was a great high-level review of the election. Any questions before we move on to process? Is that beneficial, what Kelli just reviewed with everyone? Yep, I'm seeing head shake. Okay, awesome. All right, we'll keep going.
Okay.
Okay.
So when the party of power that wins, they get to make the decisions. And so the way the process is split up, and I'm just going to use the House as the example here, because all 100 of them are up, every 2 years. And so again, every 2 years, 100 members. And once that party is selected or has the majority, then they come, immediately they're in the state house. So elections always the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So that Wednesday, everybody knows you're coming to the state house to elect leadership. And so all 4 caucuses came together on, Wednesday of that week and elected their leaders. And all 4 leaders were reelected. And so we have Todd Houston as the Speaker of the House. Todd is from Hamilton County. And then we have the minority leader, Phil Giaquinta from Fort Wayne. Then in the Senate, what's called the President Pro Tem, the Republican leader is Rod Bray, and he's from Morgan County, Martinsville. And then the Democrat leader, minority leader, is Greg Taylor, and Greg Taylor is from Indianapolis. And those 4 gentlemen then put together the rest of their leadership team. There's a couple positions that are still elected by the caucus, but most of them are appointed by the leader of that caucus. And then they manage their caucuses. And, some people would say, gosh, isn't that great that the House Republicans have 70 members? They can do all kinds of things. I can promise you, Todd Houston would really like to have about 55 members, because you can think about managing all those personalities. You kind of got one Republican caucus, and then they have caucuses within the caucus. So you have, the conservative caucus. You have the Ag Caucus. You have the, in the House Democrats, they have a minority caucus. It's so you're not only managing your caucus of 70, now you're managing those caucuses within the caucus. And so it truly is a full-time job for Todd Houston. And when I say that the legislature is a part-time job, we meet in odd years, which is 2023, we're getting ready to go into, is a long session. And then we have in the even number of years, it's a short session. So long session is January to the end of April, and short session is January till March 14th. But so you say, okay, so we're done by April in a long session that we're getting ready to go into, but it really truly is something year round. And so they get paid. People always ask this question. They get paid a per diem during session. It's a higher per diem because they have to live in Indianapolis and that kind of thing and then during the interim, when they're not in session, they get paid still a per diem every day. But it's much smaller. If they come to the State House for official business during the interim, they get that elevated per diem. Interesting fact that if you live outside of the 50-mile radius of Indianapolis, the money you get paid for your per diem is Indiana tax-free, because they figure you have to pay to live someplace because you're not driving home every night. If you live within that 50-mile radius, you have to pay Indiana income tax on that per diem. So again, just a little bit of trivia there. All the leadership positions are also paid a little bit more. And so you get, speaker and the pro tem and other leaders get a little bit additional. And so most, I would say, for this quote part-time job with their per diems and all the things that come with that, roughly a regular non-committee chair, non-leadership position legislator is probably going to make around $60,000, which isn't bad for a part-time job. but it's a lot of responsibility as we know. And then I think you could say probably the leaders could make upwards of maybe $150,000. And so that's with the per diems and all the other things that go with it. So the majority party gets to make all the decisions. And those first decisions after the leadership is elected or appointed are committee chairs. And committee chairs are very, very important because they're the ones that control everything that gets assigned to that committee. Now, leadership's going to work with them, and leadership may send a bill to a different committee than you would think it should go to because of that committee chair, and he or she can, in fact, manage that issue. And so prior to the election, Speaker Houston was assuming he was going to remain speaker, and he did appoint Jeff Thompson from Hendricks County to the Ways and Means Committee because Dr. Tim Brown was retiring. And there's so much to do in that interim leading up to the election that we needed to make sure with the state budget committee and all the things that they have to do, that they had a chairman in it. And Dr. Brown knew it shouldn't be him because since he was retiring, he shouldn't be making those decisions. So Representative Jeff Thompson has now been appointed and has already, I heard in a presentation I was at the other day, he's taken 99 meetings since he was appointed back in, I want to say September maybe. He's had 99 meetings. He hasn't said no to anyone. So he wants to learn and understand because he's been on Ways and Means for a number of years, but knew he has a lot of more to learn and people to meet and issues because his primary focus on Ways and Means has been K-12 funding, education funding. And so he's always worked on the formula and that kind of thing. So he knew he had a lot to learn. But as of, I guess it was late last week, and all the committee chairs have now been assigned both at the House and Senate level. So the House has several new committee chairs because of retirements. And so we're looking forward to working with some new committee chairs. But the ones that we normally would work with in health is still Dr. Brad Barrett. And then public policy, we might get into a bit. And so Dr. Barrett's from Richmond and has a new committee chair, and Ethan Manning is from Logansport. So those two, and then Ways and Means is where we would primarily find ourselves. If we had some education issues, that's Bob Baining, and Bob Baining is from Indianapolis and was a reappointment to that position in the House. In the Senate, there was a little bit of drama. Those of you, if you like politics and you watch the different, House of Cards and, some of those other things on Netflix and the series that you can watch, Madam Secretary. And so there's always, some kind of drama and leadership. And so we did have a little bit of that. As I said, Rod Bray was reelected as the president pro tem, but there was an inside kind of baseball story going on that maybe he might be challenged. There was a vote taken and he was challenged, and that resulted in one of the state senators, Mark Mesmer from Jasper, losing his chairmanship. So the Andy Zay, Senator Zay was the one that nominated him for that potential position, and said they both lost their chairmanship. So Senator Zay is no longer the chair of insurance, and Senator Mesmer is no longer the chair of environmental affairs. And so there are a few new chairmanships there as well. But the good news is that the people that we work with on a regular basis would be the chair of health, which is Senator Ed Charbonneau from Lake County. And again, public policy to a lesser degree, and Ron Alting, Senator Alting from the Lafayette area. And then the Appropriations Committee and Senator Mishler, who's up in the kind of Bern or Elkhart kind of county area is back there. And then in the Senate, they have two fiscal committees, both tax and fiscal and appropriations. So appropriations is the one that does the budget, and tax and fiscal obviously does, tax type issues. And so tax and fiscal is Senator Travis Holdman from the Fort Wayne area. So those committee chairs are set, and bills can now be filed and are starting to get filed, and then will get sent to the committees for those committee chairs to start looking at. And so I think it's important that, maybe we stop there before we get to the full process and see, Zoe, anything with regard to this next session, how, issue oriented that we want to talk about. People have questions on, kind of where we start, how we start. And then, well, let me do one more thing. I want to talk about the governor's race. Sorry, because I want to get out of I don't want to get too far away from the elections. I was looking at my notes here that I had put together. So everybody's asking who's going to run for governor, right? So 2022 elections are over. Those are called midterms. So we're getting ready to go into this last 2 years of Governor Holcomb's administration. Indiana has term limits for the governor. You can't serve more than 8 years in a 12-year period. So Governor Holcomb was obviously reelected to his second term, came in to a full term, and so he cannot run again. So who are the possibilities of gubernatorial candidates? So I'm going to talk about the Republicans first, because we have some announced candidates on that side. Eric Doden is a businessman from Fort Wayne, and he announced months ago and started, raising money, has raised some money, but not a well-known, individual. That's why he had to get out early and get his name out there. So we do have Eric Doden from Fort Wayne, Mike Braun, the current setting United States Senator from Indiana. Mike Braun, who served one term in the House of Representatives, he announced last week that he's filed the paperwork and intends to run for governor in 2024 and not run for the U.S. Senate. U.S. Senate is a 6-year term, so he's served 4 years so far in his Senate race, or his Senate position. And so he'll serve out those last 2 years and not run for the U.S. Senate, but run for governor. And you can run for governor still as being a sitting U.S. Senator. So he has announced, probably he had a very contentious Senate race when they ran. It was Governor Holcomb, Mike Braun, Todd Rokita, and Jim Banks, I think, all ran for. Jim Banks couldn't have, because he's in the House. But again, 4 years ago, that was a very highly sought after position. So you're going to start seeing some things, and you probably have already in the newspaper, kind of start to see different people, kind of changing chairs on the Titanic is what I like to talk about. But so we'll get to that one here after the gubernatorial. Suzanne Crouch, our current lieutenant governor, was supposed to announce, I think last week is what I was told, but when Mike Braun kind of beat her to the punch, I think she pushed it off for a short period of time. So Suzanne, who is a huge advocate of ours, chairs, sits on many committees, chairs, the 1102 task force that works with people with developmental disabilities, to you name it in human services. Suzanne Crouch is going to be a supporter. So she's going to announce. Suzanne is a terrific fundraiser. This race will probably run for the primary. This isn't even the general. So the primary in May of 2024, probably $10 million at a minimum. And then so she gets out and she's about. So Suzanne will be announcing soon. We've also heard that Trey Hollingsworth is in the United States Congress down in the southeast side of Indiana. He made a pledge when he ran that he was going to put his own term limits in, held to those term limits, and did not run again for Congress. he has shown some interest in the gubernatorial race, but some think maybe he might even look at the U.S. Senate race. Mike Braun and Trey Hollingsworth are both people that can write their own checks. And so I think both of them put millions in their own races when they ran for the seats that they have now and have the ability to do that. So I think some people are, as you talk to, people in the party, it's like who can outspend whom in between those two. Jim Banks, again, I think his name has risen both in Washington from leadership position. He was up for a majority whip position in the House, did not get that, which is the third highest elected office in that caucus. He did not get that. And so some believe he might end up running for either the Senate seat or the governor's seat. And then a name that continues to be trickled out there is Mitch Daniels, former governor, two-term governor in Indiana. Mitch, as many of you might know, is retiring as the president of Purdue. He's done a fabulous job there, even though that comes from an IU fan. That a good guy and done a great job at Purdue. But I think there's a little hint. I think it's his former, staffers and those kind of people that have that rumor out there. They'd really like to see him run again. I don't think he'll do it. Mitch has taken on a new position at Purdue. He's helping raise money for one of their foundations and some other things. I just don't think he'll be a candidate. And then the current Secretary of Commerce in Indiana, a gentleman by the name of Brad Chambers, his name's been floated out there. But I think it's going to be. And then someone would say, well, you didn't say Todd Rokita. Todd Rokita's, intimated that he might run for governor. His name's floated for governor. His name's floated for U.S. Senate. Who knows what our current attorney general might do. So those are the probably lists of candidates at this point that have shown interest, have hit, the rumor mill and all the political rags that people like to write about. It is going to be a vacant seat, U.S. Senate. You have Victoria Spartz from the 5th Congressional District has talked about, does she want to run for the U.S. Senate? As I said, Jim Banks, and then Todd Rokita. So those would be the ones that I think, you can kind of put on a list to watch for those different positions. So Indiana has a lot going on. I know I didn't talk about a lot of Democrat candidates simply because one in the U.S. Senate, we haven't had anybody really say who was interested on the Democrat side. Former Superintendent of Public Instruction Jennifer McCormick is the only one that's out there that's really being talked about. Those of you that maybe remember Dr. McCormick, she was a Democrat, and then she changed to a Republican, ran for superintendent, won, and then the superintendent position was changed to an appointed position, so it's no longer an elected position, and so now she's going back to be a Democrat, maybe to potentially run for governor. And so that is really the only candidate that's been seriously talked about. Destiny Wells, again, the former Secretary of State candidate this year, people would really like to see her run for something. Again, very qualified, and good person. So we'll see, but those are really who's out there at this point. Sorry, Zoe.
No, that was super helpful. And I'm really glad that you said that Purdue has been so successful, being a West Lafayette and all my Valley Oaks people on the phone too. So had to put Boiler up in there.
Right.
So now any questions regarding the governor's race and what we have kind of on the horizon? Okay, well, now let's maybe pivot, Kelli.
I'm going to make one plug, and Zoe didn't ask me to do this, but everybody on here, if you haven't contributed to the PAC, it takes a lot of money to run for the election. As I said, It's ridiculous. It's insane. But well, one Senate race, I didn't even bring this up. This is a state Senate race. One candidate spent $1.6 million. One candidate in a Senate race, $1.6 million for a $60,000 job. That's the way I kind of compare. So it's expensive. It's insane. Think about the money we could use if we put all those resources together, what we could do in our local communities for our constituencies. But I can't look at it that way. So I make a plug for the PAC. Again, it's individual contributions. As little as $5 to $10 goes a long way when we put lots of those $5s and $10 together. But I'll make the plug for the PAC today.
Well, I appreciate you making that plug, and I do have that link available on the slides here later as we're going to be talking about events and things of how we connect with our local legislators. So now, from now until January, when they're back in session, it is crucial for us to be reaching out to our local legislators, as each of you represent such a significant constituent within your markets. And so now we're going to pivot to the things we are working on this legislative session. And as all of you probably know, but it cannot be restated enough, we do have one of the most significant asks along with the Behavioral Health Commission. And so I'm going to have Kelli talk about the policies that we are working on. You can also view those on our website. The public policy platform, Leanne Jordan, our communications and membership manager, put a phenomenal resource together. Those are available for you to print and share. Some of you have reached out for some copies. We have some on stock. So we can, be able to get those to you, but you don't have to remember all of this. I can't stress enough, and Kelli will talk about this too, the consistency in messaging. If we all take the 70 plus people on this call and message consistently regarding the direction we would like to head with mental health in our state, that message will help get us to the finish line. So Kelli, do you want to highlight some of those key items for us?
Sure. So over the last 2 years, legislators and members probably on this call, I don't know who, Zoe just said 70. Wow, that's really awesome that you care enough to be here today. Have participated in the Behavioral Health Commission. And we have a true advocate in Senator Mike Kreider. And Senator Kreider represents just a smidgen of Marion County and Hancock County. And the Behavioral Health Commission spent 2 years, in the constituency and of members that were on that commission are just unbelievable, and can't thank you enough for those that, if you're on this call, participated, because it was one during COVID. So it was just a tough, way to communicate and to research, and we've had people reaching out from other states saying, and Zoe, gets this all the time, they just want to change the state of Indiana and put their state's name in it, because it's been such a well researched, documented plan for our state to move forward in enhancements for behavioral health in our state. So we have that as kind of our roadmap. And then we've got the work that so many of you in the state have been working on for the CCBHC 988, and even our justice systems. And so we're going to have a package in 2023, and we really want to talk about it as a package, because it's like a puzzle. Every piece is important to putting that entire puzzle together, and it's going to look really good when we get it done. And it's not going to be done in 2023. It's not going to be done until about 2025 or 6, but we can start putting the edges of our puzzle. That's kind of, as I was thinking about this one, talk about it, because I'm a visual learner. And so what can we share with legislators that, we can say, this is our puzzle, and every single one of you, 150 of you, are a piece of our puzzle. And then what we put in this package that we start in 2023 is what I would call, how you put a puzzle together, the outside edges. And so everybody's got to be looking at the same puzzle piece and say, that's where it goes and that's where it goes. So you're critical in putting this puzzle together. So we are going to have some puzzle pieces in the Senate, and we're going to have some in the House. And Senator Mike Kreider is going to carry those things that are non-fiscal. And when I say that, any piece of legislation that is a revenue generating, it has to start in the House. And so when we talk about 988 is our mobile crisis teams, and we are going, the phone call that goes and then releases, that mobile crisis team. We are asking the legislature for a $1 surcharge. And I want to be really careful. We don't talk about a tax. It's a surcharge on each mobile, device bill to help fund our 988 mobile crisis teams. And I'm being real simplistic. Zoe's the expert. I'm just a lobbyist. And so, I can go about this far on a lot of different issues, but so that's going to be in the House. We're not sure, people are saying, what's the bill number? I'm not sure we're going to have a bill number. We're trying to decide if it's going to be in the budget, and it's a budget ask, because the budget is definitely has a number. It's 1001. It's always the number one bill in the House every other year. And so we're working with legislators and leadership to get that language potentially in the budget. So our 988 ask will be a $1 surcharge to help fund those kinds of services that are needed within that piece of the puzzle. The infrastructure for CCBHC will be in the Senate, and Senator Kreider will have that language, and that language will encompass, the state plan amendment for setting up that structure, continue to set up the structure for CCBHC. And then the funding piece for that, the bridge funding, will go, again, remember, money will probably be over in our budget ask with the House. And so because many of you, as you know, we need about $30 million for this next biennium for the CCBHC continuation of that process. And so we'll have that, we'll have the 988, and then again, Representative Greg Steuerwald, Amy gets credit for this one too. Hendricks County representative has been working on the criminal justice bill, which again is a more humane way to deal with, in my term, more humane way to deal with individuals that may have found themselves in a situation there they're arrested or taken from the community, and get them into some kind of assessment and placement for services quicker, without just sending them in jail or sitting them in an emergency department in your local hospital for hours with no services and no crisis management. So those are primarily the three issues that we're going to be working on, and how they've kind of where they land. Representative Steuerwald's bill will start in the House. And then we're going to have some additional ask that are around group home funding, both group home funding from a capital perspective, as well as a daily rate per diem that will support some of your, we're not using this term anymore. I was told yesterday, which I think is really a good change. We're talking about daily rate support for group home, not room and board. And so room and board is an antiquated term that we're not using. And so we're going to use that term daily per diem. And so we're working with the House side again to document the need for getting people off of our wait lists, and how we can better support our communities through their group behavioral health group homes. And so those would be what I would consider to be our priority. And I kind of did them in priority. CCBHC and 988 are 1A and 1B or 1AA. So I hate to do that, but we really have to have those two things together to make our system work. And then we would then talk about the criminal justice assessment bill is what we're kind of calling it, and then group home. And then top of mind of all healthcare providers, and Zoe's part, and many of you are part of the team that's working on workforce development. And so we haven't forgot workforce, got to have workforce, to support what you all do every day. But that's such a big, every single group's talking about it. So we've kind of left that to the side, and we're supporters, but not necessarily the instigators of those platforms. So with that, I'd be happy to open it up, ask questions about the issues, ask questions about, where they are. And then I want to just do a short synopsis of the process and kind of what to look forward once January gets here.
So we did get one question in the chat, and I've heard this question as well. So I think it's great to be able to be consistent with our messaging there. Will we be competing with the Governor's Public Health Commission for funding?
Yes, and yes. Diana knows. I got an email from Tim Crockett, their CFO, last night that said, Kelly, were you on the Dr. Box and Senator Luke Kinley call yesterday on the rollout of the Public Health Commission recommendations? I said, no. He said, are we going to get confused with? I said, our goal, the answer to Tim was yes. Our goal is we cannot let legislators get what I'm calling commission fatigue, because the Behavioral Health Commission has been working on this issue a lot longer than the Public Health Commission. The governor instituted this Public Health Commission maybe a year ago. I'm not even sure it's been a full year. Selected some pretty high profile people. Obviously, our commissioner of the top physician in the state and Dr. Box at the Department of Health, former state senator Luke Kinley from Hamilton County, former State Department of Health Dr. Judy Monroe, and former U.S. Attorney and United States Congresswoman Susan Brooks. Sorry. You don't get those four people and not do something significant, right? So they have put out this Public Health Commission report that's asking for, I don't know, $400 and some million over the last 2 years to be funneled through our 92 local health departments to support whatever those local health departments, and I'm being very, casual here and very, high level, and those 92 health departments get to decide what to spend those monies on. So I have heard, and this is what I told Tim, I've heard nothing positive from legislators on the Public Health Commission report, nothing. And all I've heard is from, and I'm not saying this because you hear what you want to hear. Legislators are talking very positively about the Behavioral Health Commission. And again, I think it's less money that can go a lot further because we have the infrastructure. We have 24 of you that then have how many people that work for those 24 of you that do this every day, have been doing it every day. When you talk about a public local health department, they give, sewer permits, they give, you name it. They have the local, the immunizations, and they have this and they have that, but they don't have a focus on what we're talking about, public health. It's so many other things that where I'm not sure legislators believe that's the right place to put the resources, these kinds of resources. So I do think there'll be some commission fatigue. That's why we have to be so razor sharp on our message and make sure that it's very simple. Don't make it complicated. And that's why, when we do our talking points, you got to have 2, 3, 4, I wouldn't even go 4, but 3 top level, top shelf. This is why we have to have this, and this is the impact it has on your community. And you've got to make it's local, local, local. There are 150 legislators. Someone asked me the question the other day. We don't have to have all 150 vote for something. In the House, you got to have 51 to pass something. In the Senate, you have to have 26. But we want all 150 to have heard from their local community mental health center provider on what's important. And so calls like this are important, follow-up are important, so that we keep that Behavioral Health Commission ask far and above anything else that they're looking at.
And our new fearless leader of public policy, Beth, had a question on, can you talk a little bit about how we can support legislative objectives now and then also during session? And could you also talk a little bit about when you will need us at the State House and how that will be communicated? That's going to be what I'm going to end with, Beth. Kelli, do you want to talk a little bit about supporting the legislative objectives now and during session?
Yeah. So right now is the perfect time to talk to your legislator. So today is, what is today? What is today? 6th. So no, this is December 6th. The legislature starts January 9th. So you've got 1 month, take out the week, of Christmas, take out the week between Christmas and New Year's. You've got a couple weeks right now to find out who your legislator is. And if you don't know who your legislator is, I actually think I can pull up a slide real quick that I could share on how to find your legislator, or get it to Leanne so that Leanne can push it out after this meeting.
It's also on our website as well.
Okay. So you find out who your legislator is and you contact them. You say who you are, what your job is in your local community and at your community mental health center, and that you want to share these 3, again, top level things on our legislative initiative for 2023. That's it. And then say, this is how you contact me, a cell number, and this is how you contact me through your email. And so you've initiated that conversation. Then after January 9th, when they're in session, you follow up and you say, hey, I emailed you on X date, gave you our initiatives. Now we have bill numbers, or now we have this, and follow up with them, making sure that you have this, front and center. And if you have any questions, call me. So again, you don't become their pen pal, but you have to initiate that engagement. And then you have to follow up on that engagement. I promise you, they're just like this. They're just like us talking. They're elected, yes, but they're businessmen and women. They're teachers. They're physicians. They're retired businessmen and they're farmers. They're just like us. And I promise you, once you get to know them, 9 times out of 10, you're really going to like them, and they're going to like you. I mean, because you're doing something in their local community. So now establish at least a communication line. January, follow up with that. And then Zoe's going to talk, I know, about February 8th, which is our legislative day. Then, come to that, work with your, CEO, whomever, but figure out a way to do that so that you can see them face to face. There's nothing wrong in your first email saying, hey, I'd love to have a cup of coffee, or I'd love to invite you to one of our outpatient clinics, or I'd love to, again, just that connection. They want people like you to contact them. They're sitting back waiting for you to tell them what they need to do next session. And so as the quicker you can get that engagement with them, the more successful you're going to be for your local agency, as well as we're going to be successful as a statewide organization.
Any questions regarding that before we wrap up? I guess we could have made this more of like a half day type session, but there is more to come on learning about our legislative process and meeting with our legislators. So I did put into the chat several resources. I've emailed these out several times, but People have asked me, what are the two things you use to describe CCBHC and the process? Because it's very complicated. 988 is simple, right? In my mind, it's a dollar surcharge. It is going to go to mobile assessment, crisis stabilization support, and that 988. Once you start talking about certified community behavioral health clinics, you kind of get that deer in the headlight look, right? But you can't have one without the other. And that's why I agree with Kelly very much. It's a 1AA, because that CCBHC, as we all know, is delivering the mobile assessments, delivering the crisis stabilization, and then delivering the services of the ongoing care from 988. If we just have 988, we still just have a call system, and that's not an improvement or improving access to care within our infrastructure. And so in that attachment, the two reports I use for CCBHC, that if you have not read them, I strongly encourage you to read them. That is the CCBHC plan that was submitted to the legislators. That is what a lot of you on this call helped write with DMHA. And then the CCBHC impact report. So here's the thing with CCBHC, and David Josie asked me about data and gathering stuff. CCBHC, this isn't the first rodeo, right? This has been done on a federal level in many states who have seen significant impact in their increase of workforce, some states as high as 60 to 70% increase, and as a result then have improved access. That impact report has that data to be able to really speak to the great work all of you are doing as pilots for CCBHC, and if this could actually have a sustainable structure, move us forward. So please use those resources. They're for you. You can also access all of this on our website as well. And then I'm going to pivot because it's right at 9:30. I'm going to save my announcements and other stuff for my update coming out this week. So if you are not on my email list, please reach out to Denise to make sure that you get on it. But I want to end with this. February 8th, we will be adding a day to our winter conference. So we have booked the Hyatt in Indianapolis downtown. And so February 8th will be the start where we will learn from our lobbyists what legislators we need to connect with that day and what talking points we need to share with them. Then we will have an opening in the morning by possibly Senator Kreider and the Lieutenant Governor to welcome everybody. We will get resources, talking points, the platform. We will hand it all to you. We will walk over to the State House for an informal lunch. So you could reach out to your legislators now and say, hey, I'm going to be at the State House February 8th for lunch, would love to see you. And you start developing that relationship. We're giving you the resources, the place, the people to talk to right at your fingertips. And so that will be February 8th. How you can attend that is an individual, small to large, whatever you can, individual, not agency donation to our PAC. And so that will be on our website. And so we would love to have all of you on this call and to be able to connect with our legislators on February 8th. Then February 9th and 10th, we will be having our winter conference. February 9th is going to be focusing a lot on the Indiana Supreme Court and SAMHSA, as well as state hospital relationships. And then February 10th is going to be really a morning of workforce discussion. We have the Department of Higher Education coming, as well as working with the Director of Workforce at DMHA, and best practices on workforce panel discussion. So all of that will also be coming out this week. We are expecting around 200 people throughout the week. Committee meetings will also be done on February 8th once we're done with lunch. So please get your reservation in early. It will be at the Hyatt, very walkable to be able to connect with legislators. And then last but not least, I do want to share that people are probably thinking, how do I go to the PAC? So you go to the PAC via our website. There is a PAC button there that you click on. And again, it can be a personal $5 all the way on up to whatever you're able to contribute. And then last but not least, just because of the urgency of it, I did want to highlight on Friday, I sent out a federal policy ask, and that is around the Senate Finance Committee's work that is being done with mental health. It has a number of provisions in it around Medicare for opening up the LMFT and the LMHCs that a lot of us have advocated for many, many years. It has a lot of telehealth sustainability to continue for Medicare and Medicaid on a national federal level. And it also has some other increased funding opportunities for mental health. If you have not taken action on that and did not see that from me on Friday, they are wrapping up those conversations. I strongly believe that Senator Young voted yes because of each of you paying your voice forward on that Community Safes Act. And as a result, we were able to get additional funding for CCBHC and a chance at this demonstration. It's your voice that made that happen. So I appreciate all of you. We're just 5 minutes over, but in tradition, raise your cups. I want to thank Kelli for her leadership and support, and all of you for being on the call. Please, if you have questions after, Kelli's super accessible and great at answering stuff. Reach out to myself, Leanne, Andy, and Denise, who are also on the call. And then we have a winner as well for the Hamilton Center, or not Hamilton Center Starbucks, but he's from Hamilton Center. And that is Tanner. Tanner, you are the winner of the Starbucks gift card. So thank you everyone for participating. And if there's anything you need, you know where to find me. Have a great day.